Yeah. Queen City, stay hot. From the banks of the Ohio where the river runs slow, got the whole Queen City screaming, let's go. Red caps high when the first pitch pops, Cincinnati on fire and we stay red hot. Big red legacy, rats stay loud, ball flying out while the fans stand proud. From the riverfront seats to the top of the chart, talking Reds baseball, yeah we bring the spark. Stay red hot, let the whole world know. Queen City baseball, putting on the show. From the first pitch drop to the last swing shot, Cincinnati Reds, yeah we stay red hot.
Welcome to the new Stay Reds Hot podcast. I am Patrick Kelch. Alongside me tonight is Greg at Reds Daily 4 on X, formerly known as Twitter, and want to thank him for dedicating his time to us on Sunday. And Greg, just tell us a little bit about yourself. I know, 18,000 followers on Twitter and a very popular Reds follow for me. You're my go-to for Red sports. So just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became Reds Daily.
Yeah, sure. So from Ohio, obviously a diehard Reds fan growing up. Even when I was a kid, if I would be outside playing baseball, I'd have them on the radio. My parents had a garage radio that I'd make sure I'd have cranked up. So always followed all the Reds. And then, I don't know, I think it was 2021 maybe when I started my June 2021. I'm looking at it now. When I started this Reds account, and I always found myself, putting tweets out on my own personal Twitter, which it doesn't even exist anymore. And I was just tweeting about the Reds to my friends, which I'm like, these people don't care about that. I'm just tweeting stuff about the Reds. So I was like, what if I just create a Reds account and kind of follow minded Reds fans and interact back and forth. And then it kind of just took on a life of its own. I think the thing people like a lot is when I do the highlights of all the different broadcasts, the away team and the home team, those things kind of took off. And then, if you told me when 2021 in 5 years, I would have had 18,000 followers, I would have said you're crazy. So just a Reds fan that needed a place to talk about the Reds, and I started it up and it's just kind of taken off.
Well, it's been great for me because I'm one of those fans that kind of live and die on every pitch. I watch probably 100 to 130 games a year. Every home run, every strikeout, every pitch that comes down the middle. I'm just like, the Reds win on Monday, we're World Series champs. They lose on Tuesday, we're not even good enough to make the playoffs. I'm one of those type fans, but also like your minor league coverage. Very few people, and I don't follow the minor league, so I rely on you a lot for that information and, who the prospects are and, what to look for, who's coming up. And, and that kind of leads me to my first question for you. I just want to get your opinion. I know that you're not Terry Francona, and I know that you probably don't have much, any inside scoop, but I do know you're a lot more knowledgeable than me. But, I constantly see a lot of reports about some position battles going on during spring training. And one of them is like for the final bench spot. And they keep mentioning Will Benson. What's this guy got to do to make the team? It seems like every year his energy, I know he strikes out a lot. I know, but, he's in a battle, according to several websites, with J.J. Bleday and Nathaniel Lowe for the final bench spot. Who's got the edge right now in your opinion? And, what's Will Benson got to do to get a spot?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I think if anything, this is what I like most about this Reds team, because in years past, all three of these guys would have been on the roster, no questions asked. So the fact that one of these guys has a chance to not make the roster tells you how much better the front office did in adding depth to this team for this year. So I kind of start with that. But I think even with how Francona kind of, it almost seemed like, I know a lot of fans said this, but it almost seemed like he disliked Will Benson with how much he didn't play him at times last year. But he did have a quote earlier this spring that kind of thought, I think he feels safe, and it could be down to Lowe and Bleday, but I'm just going off of what Francona said. He mentioned how he could play all 3 outfield spots, which you can't say the same about Blade. Nathaniel Lowe is obviously pretty much a first base DH guy. So I think that helps Benson, especially because if, Friedel goes out, you have another left-hander that could play center field. Obviously, you have Dane Myers, who they got in the offseason, who could also play there. But I would say Benson is probably – I think he will make the roster. I also think right now, if you put me on the spot, I also think Nathaniel Lowe he seems like a Tito guy, like a veteran. He won a Gold Glove. He's an experienced guy. He won a World Series. Like Tito if anything, he loves guys that he can trust, and Nathaniel Lowe kind of just seems like that. It's kind of a weird fit because the Reds don't really need another first baseman. But yeah, I would say kind of rambling there, but I would say I think Will Benson has a good shot to make the team. But that last roster battle that roster battle for those, that last spot is very interesting because, like I said, in years past, all 3 of those guys would have made the team no problem.
Well, and that leads me to something else I was going to ask you about. It seems like there's a log jam at first base, and I know Lowe plays first base. I know he's got a big bat. I know he can provide some maybe power, but they've mentioned Suarez at first base, which I know he can maybe give some time at third. I know he's not the defensive specialist that Cabrian Hayes is, but then you got Sal Stewart, Spencer Steer. I mean, and I know you got the DH, but does that play a factor in, you think, Lowe making the roster? That the fact is that there's so many first basemen on the roster.
Yeah, maybe. It just feels like it just feels like to me. Again, I know I said it just feels like he's a Tito guy, and he's also shown that he's the one out of all 3 of those guys who has hit right-handed pitching the best over his career. Obviously, Blade is a former top draft pick, so he has a ton of upside. We've seen Benson have years where he crushes right-handers. We've seen years where he struggles. Lowe has been pretty consistent. Outside of 2024, he's been really consistent. And last year, his struggles really came against left-handed pitching, which I don't think the Reds are going to ask him to face any left-handed pitching at all. Right. So basically going off those kind of things, I kind of think like they could be creative and be like, hey, if Sal Stewart needs a day off, they could, slide somebody. They could slide, put Steer in, Low in, and who am I forgetting? Suarez. They can kind of move those guys around and play them in different spots. I think if you wanted to go all offense one day and you had all those guys on the roster, you could take Cabrian Hayes out of the lineup and move Suarez or Stewart over to third, and then you could have Suarez, Stewart, and Nathaniel Lowe all in the lineup. So it does make it a little more difficult for sure because it's not just another outfielder. But I think if you want to, I would say he doesn't have as much upside as a guy like JJ Bleday, but I think his ceiling or his floor is higher because he's a guy that I think when I wrote an article about this earlier this year, but I think he's had over a 10% walk rate in almost every year of his career, which is huge because when you're slumping, walks don't slump. It's an easy way to get on base. So just the way he walks, the way he hits against right-handed pitching, I think that's why I still kind of give him the edge.
Well, and the one complaint I've had about the Reds hitters in years past is not seeing enough pitches, getting really aggressive at the plate, not walking a lot when they are slumping. And I know sometimes when you're slumping, it's easy to go up there and swing freely, trying to knock it out of the park to get out of that slump. But sometimes, like you said, a free pass is maybe the best way to come out of that slump. It's kind of like in basketball, you're missing threes, but sometimes the best way to get out of it is to hit a free throw, see the ball go through the net, get on base. I agree. I was really, I mentioned to you off the air for a minute, I was really expecting to be able to talk about Kyle Schwarber as a Red, and I was a little disappointed that he decided to go elsewhere. But, I really got a little excited to bring Suarez back. He was a fan favorite, the first time he was here, and he's done nothing but produce since he left here. I'm really happy to have him back. So, talk about, what adding him to this already powerful lineup means and just what kind of impact he can have.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll be completely honest with you. At first, when people said the Reds, had the Reds in talks with Suarez, I was not so sure about it. And not because of I don't think he can, not because I don't think he can go hit 40 home runs at Great American Ballpark, but I was worried about they were going to give him like someone was going to give him like a 3 to 4 year deal. And I feel like Suarez is a guy who might not age great. We saw it a little bit in the second half last year when he went to Seattle, but that's a very pitchers friendly ballpark. He was pretty good away from Seattle, even when he was on the Mariners. But when I saw they got him for 1 year, $15 million, like even if he's bad this year, it's gone next year. It's not Jamie Candelario. It's not Mike Moustakas, who you're still paying. So like that was a no-brainer. Like that was I still can't believe they got him for 1 year, $15 million. I mean, we're talking about a guy who hit 49 home runs last year. That's crazy. So he helps this team in so many ways. I mean, the Reds top two, I don't know the top three, but the top two were Ellie and Spencer Steer, who I think hit a combined 43 home runs last year. So if Suarez has a down year and he hits 30 home runs, like it's going to help, because one thing this team struggled with so much last year was not being able to hit the ball out of the ballpark. I say it all the time, but pitchers are way too good in today's game to rely on having to get 4 or 5 hits in a row to score 2 runs. Like it's way easier if you're down 1-0 to just have somebody up there to go hit it out of the ballpark.
Right.
And Suarez isn't going to be a guy who gets on base at a 375 clip or 350 clip, but he's going to be a guy that if you're down 1 in the 9th inning, he can certainly win you the game or tie you the game.
And I think that, that's what surprised me most about, I guess, last year's roster is I think, I'm not even so sure Ellie hit a home run the last couple months of the season. It seemed like he was stuck on what he ended up with 21, 18, 21, somewhere 19 in that
20,
range.
I think it was 22. I think Steer had 21.
Right. So like you said, 43 combined, and, he hit 49 himself. So definitely an impact, and it does make up for, missing out on Schwarber. I did see where Suarez hit a home run in the World Baseball Classic. So it seems like he's still doing that. So I agree with you. The 1 year, $15 million is not a contract that's going to have long lasting effects if he doesn't produce for the one season. So I think that's a very good point. I wasn't really for sure his contract or what it was, but that makes you feel a little bit better. What would be your major concern going into the season? I saw a guy today, random fan on Facebook. He predicted the National League Central, and he predicted the Reds to win the Central. I don't know if he was a Reds fan. I don't really know. It's just a common name, but he predicted the Reds to win the Central. Didn't really give any reasons why, but I think the Reds definitely have that capability. But what would be your major concern going into the season for this team?
Oh gosh, I would say I'm not concerned about pitching. I will say that even with the Hunter Green news that he may miss some time, I'm not too worried about their pitching. I think their pitching should be in a pretty good spot. And I think they should have a decent offensive team. But if you're asking me where I'm concerned is what I'm thinking the guys that will step up this year to make them a good offensive team. I guess I would be concerned like that those guys don't take the next step. Like I'm talking about guys like Matt McClain. Like we've obviously seen what he's done in spring, but again, take spring training results with a grain of salt. But if he can even be just an average player this year compared to what he was last year, like it helps this offense so much. If Cabrian Hayes can just be a little bit of below average offensive player, like he helps the offense a lot, because last year he was just an automatic out. If Ellie De La Cruz plays like he does in the first half, besides when he was playing with the quad injury in the second half. So there's a lot of those things that you're kind of relying on. I think Sal Stewart has a ton of upside, but again, we're putting a ton of stock into a guy that's played 18 major league games. So those are kind of the things I would say I'm a little bit hesitant or worried about, because I think we all learned a lesson in 2023 when all those guys came up and we're like, they're here, they're back. And then 2024 was like a disaster. McClain was out for the year. CES struggled. Marte got suspended. There was just all sorts of things. And we thought those guys were all there to stay and all there. And then, so I guess I would say just those guys taking the next step. I'd say I'm counting on it, but if they don't, I'd be a little bit worried.
Right. And, that was the one thing I was going to ask about, you said take it with a grain of salt, but Matt McClain's had a tremendous spring. I think he's batting like 545 and got like 4 home runs. And, but the thing is, he doesn't have to do a whole lot to be better than what he was last year. I think he was my biggest disappointment last year. And I think we know he's better than what he showed. So hopefully, like you said, if he can produce in it all and a lot better. But do you feel any will they? I mean, will they go away from him? Or I know Tito trusted him a lot last year. He played a lot of games, got a lot of bats. But is there anybody that can play second base, in the minor leagues that they would give a chance if?
The only guy really I would say it would be Edwin Arroyo. He's one of their top prospects who they got along with Noelvi Marte in the Luis Castillo trade. And he's a shortstop, really good shortstop, but obviously LA De La Cruz is a shortstop. So they could maybe play him at second base. But I'm just looking at the numbers, and like Matt McClain in 2023 had an 864 OPS. In 2025, it was 643. So like 200, we're talking 220 points worse. Like I just don't see a way that he's that bad again this year. And I do think one thing that a lot of fans aren't thinking enough about, like it's very hard to come back from big like surgery like that. And he had a shoulder surgery that put him out for the whole year. So like I'm like, if he can get to a 700 OPS, that's still below average by a little bit, but like that's so much better than what last year was. So I just don't see a world where he's going to be truly that bad again. And the reason, if he can just be average offensively, is it helps. He's a good defensive second baseman. So if he's just average offensively, like he's going to be a good player. But I truly think he's going to be a slightly above average player at least this year, because what he's shown this spring, again, we can say results don't matter, which they don't in spring training. But we do know confidence. You said you're a high school coach. Like we do know confidence matters. If you hit a shot, like your confidence goes up. It doesn't matter if it's in practice or if you're out in your backyard shooting or whatever it is. If Matt McClain's hitting 4 home runs in 6 games, he's feeling good at the plate. And we know what that does for players' confidence. So that can never be a bad thing, regardless of what, we say about spring training.
Yeah, he's hitting a home run every 5 at bats right now. So, I mean, the one thing I've also read that, a lot of pundits, and, you can put their opinions with a grain of salt as well, because they're no different than the rest of us. But a lot of pundits seem to think depth is an issue because of the split squads. When they do the split squads, the scores seem to be, like today I saw 13-4. And, but, you've kind of mentioned is that a concern to you? Or, a lot of those guys that are playing on that split squad may not even see a major league roster this year. So,
yeah, no, I think they're in much better. I think it's been an issue in the past. We saw last year, Blake Dunn and Jacob Hurtubise, making the roster making the opening day roster, I should say. And like, no offense to those guys, but those guys aren't making many teams' opening day roster. Now we're talking about, like you just said, we're talking about keeping one of JJ Bleday and Nathaniel Lowe or Will Benson off the opening day roster. And guess what? We're not even talking about guys like Reese Hines or CES or Edwin Arroyo, like we just talked about. Like they're going to have that Louisville team is actually going to be fun to watch. They're going to hit a lot of home runs down there. Because Reese Hines, like he's another guy. Like I know people laugh when I bring him up, but he dropped his strikeout rate in Louisville by 12% last year. Like that's a big deal, because his biggest thing is if he can control the zone, he's going to hit for power. And if he can keep improving on that, like he has so much potential. So I think their depth is offensively, I think their depth's in a pretty good spot.
Well, I was just looking at Reese Hines. I was going to ask you about it. He's only batted 20 times. He's batting 400, 2 home runs, 5 RBIs. 8 hits and 20 at bats. And, he's a guy that we've seen at the major leagues, a few different times for stints, and, maybe not a full season or not gotten a full season worth of bats, but, he's definitely somebody that I feel comfortable in the lineup. But
yeah,
it just, I don't know. There's something about it just seemed to me that, it just is like Will Benson's always fighting for a roster spot. And it just, I feel like, and I don't know what he's like in the clubhouse, but he seems like a very high energy guy. When he hits that home run, I love watching him, just the emotions he shares. But it's just, that tells me that the roster has to be pretty strong,
Yeah,
so
exactly. I think offensively it's in the best position it's been in at least a while.
And you mentioned you thought starting pitching was one of their strengths. And, they did announce that Andrew Abbott, taking Hunter Green's spot due to his elbow stiffness, will be the opening day starter. Any concerns with Abbott? I know he hadn't had the best spring. I think when I looked a while ago, he's pitched, he's 0-2 with a 12.27 ERA. So, I mean, once again, spring training results don't mean a whole lot, but any concern with Andrew Abbott going into the season?
No, I don't think so. I try not to worry about starting pitchers, ERA type of stuff, and because you have no idea really what they're going out there to do.
And
A
they're
lot of
pitching
them
very few innings at that. So
exactly. So if you get beat up, your ERA is going to be huge. But a lot of times, like Andrew Abbott had a quote yesterday, whatever he started yesterday or a couple days ago. After he kind of said at the end of the quote, he kind of said, "I need to stop working on stuff now and kind of go out there and get outs." But which just goes to show you, a lot of times at the beginning of spring training, guys are throwing pitches more than they normally would, like experimenting with different things, as opposed to like going in there and just being like, I got to do whatever I can to get this guy out. Because spring training is the time to try that stuff out. Like, it's one thing to do it when there's no batter, and you're throwing a bullpen, but spring training is the only time that you're throwing against guys that it really doesn't matter. So it's a perfect time to go experiment with some stuff. So I'd say no overall. I'm not too worried about Abbott's spring training numbers.
And it seems like Abbott, he seems to be really consistent once the season starts. He eats up a lot of innings. He throws a lot of strikes. He's like a grinder on the mound. Like, he just, I honestly have a lot of confidence in him on the mound. I think the Reds have a chance every time he's out there. Well, I feel the same way about Hunter Green. And, I think Lodolo, he's another one that I believe in. But it seems like there's the fifth starter is a question too. And it's been up between Chase Burns, Rhett Lauder. And, both of those guys have had Burns had a rough outing today, I think, but he only threw a few innings. But Lauder's been really, really good this offseason. Who do you think gets that fifth spot? Maybe there's two spots open now that Hunter Green's injured. Maybe they go with both. Tell me about the upside of those two guys.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think pretty much I'd be more surprised if Green's ready to go by opening day at this point. So I would think they're both going to slot in there. Brandon Williamson maybe has an outside shot, but I have a hard time believing he's going to get in over those guys. Chase Burns, you said today, yeah, he struggled, but he was really good outside of one pitch. He gave up a 3-run home run, which, again, you're pitching how many innings, it just blows up your day. But I'm trying to look. There was a tweet. Here it is. I'm going to read this tweet from Charlie Goldsmith, which just shows the upside of Chase Burns. He said, in his spring training start today, when the Padres swung at Chase Burns' slider, they whiffed 9 out of 14 times, which is 64%. In his previous spring training outing, batters whiffed at his slider 8 out of 9 times, which is 89%, which is just insane. Like, that's you're getting major league hitters to whiff on your one pitch, 60% of the time, which is just insane. So his upside is just so high. And then Rhett Lauder is just so interesting because he's kind of polar opposite from a guy like Chase Burns. He doesn't wow you with his stuff, but everyone you talk to and every article you see with quotes about Lauder, it just seems like he knows how to pitch. Like, he knows how to sequence pitches. It's completely different than the overpowering stuff that Chase Burns has. But that's pretty exciting to have two. You're talking about two former first round picks, and those two guys are going to be your fourth and fifth starter. I mean, that's pretty impressive. So I think Burns has ace potential, and I think Lauder is just he should just be a solid major league pitcher that really knows how to get outs and sequence pitches and uses different stuff.
I've been excited to see Rhett Lauder for a while now. I just remember watching a few college baseball games where he pitched and thought, this guy's really good. I kind of had the same thoughts about Paul Skeens too, but I don't know if Lauder's going to be that good or not. That guy's dominant. But, the back end of the pitching is usually the concern for me. And, I get on Twitter every year and gripe and complain about the Reds bullpen and how they consistently blow leads, it seems. But, what I don't often share is I watch more Reds games than any other team. So I only see when the Reds bullpen blows games. I don't see when every other major league team has bullpen issues. And it constantly seems like the Reds are the one team that has bullpen. But, I know that's not the case. I just watch them a lot more than I do anyone else. But, how do you feel about the bullpen going in? Do you feel like it's better than last year? I wanted them to I know they just signed a pitcher from the Pirates that's supposedly supposed to help the bullpen, but you know more about it than I do. So, share your thoughts on the bullpen or where you think it's at right now and how it's
Yeah,
going to be, I guess.
I think they upgraded. I think the interesting part about the bullpen, it doesn't feel like they have like a bona fide stud down there. Like they don't have someone that you just know is going to go out there like an Aroldis Chapman and just strike out the side. But what I do think they have is a bunch of guys in the bullpen that can pitch almost anywhere. You now for the most part, we're going to see Santillan and Pagan 8th and 9th inning, much like we saw last year. But I think outside of that, like all those guys you can mix and match a lot. Whereas last year you had like a guy like Brent Suter in there. I think we all liked Brent Suter, the human, but like he was down there to pitch in a 8-3 blowout game that he'd give him a couple innings. Ian Jabot was on the roster a couple different times. So like when you look at some of the guys that were pitching last year, I think they're in a much better spot. We had to rely on Luis May and Zach Maxwell at times last year. Those guys aren't pitching good in the spring. I don't think they're going to make the roster. So I think they're in a better. I'd say it's kind of similar to what I said about like the floor with like Nathaniel. I think the bullpen's floor is much higher because they have a lot of solid guys down there. I don't know if they have a guy that's like going to be their go-to 7th inning guy every time. But I think they have a bunch of solid guys who can be pretty good put together. But again, we're talking about, someone said this to me the other day, and this is where you kind of get a little nervous. Like 2 years ago, every Reds fan thought Pagan was terrible because he didn't have a good year. And then last year he had a great year. So you're hoping he's going to be great again. And kind of same with Santillan. Like he's had a cool story. He's came back from a ton of injuries and like turned in good. But like you're talking about those guys, your 8th, 9th inning guys, which good because they were great last year. But with relievers, they're just such kind of a crapshoot that you never know what you're going to get. So that's kind of where I fall on it.
Well, you mentioned Luis May and Zach Maxwell, and I read where those two with Sam Mole were kind of fighting for a final bullpen spot. So would you think Sam Mole is Sam Mole a lefty?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where it's interesting. He'd be the third lefty because they got Caleb Ferguson and Brock Burke both in the offseason. But the reason I think he has the advantage, he doesn't have any minor league options left. So they'd have to DFA him, and he's not going to get through waivers. He's I think when he's pitching well and healthy, he's one of the better lefty relievers in the game. Now he hasn't been that the last year and a half or so. But again, I don't think it's worth risking losing him because who knows when one of those lefties in the bullpen gets hurt and you might need another good lefty to just not, have somebody else on the opening day roster. So, but again, not a lot of teams carry 3 lefties in a bullpen. So I would probably say I'd still give the shot to him, but I know there's guys like TJ Antone who's been good this spring, and
that's what I was going to ask.
Of different guys.
Is Antone not guaranteed a roster spot?
No, he's probably battling in that same group, and he's not even on the 40-man roster. So that means they'd have to make a 40-man roster move to get him on there, which makes things more difficult. But that could also be like Sam Mole if they were just to swap those two. So, but it's just Antone, like, as cool of a story is, you just worry, like, can you rely on that guy to be in the bullpen all year long
without being hurt?
We've seen exactly. Yeah. So, but it's tough to say that because we all root for that guy. I mean, coming back from 3 Tommy John surgeries is incredible, and I don't think he's given up a run this spring. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, cool story for sure.
He's pitched 3 innings with only 1 walk, 3 strikeouts. So, I mean, yeah. And I think, when he was healthy coming up, I mean, I felt like he was as consistent and reliable as anybody they had. I felt like, his stuff was really good. And just, there's some of these athletes in all sports that just can't stay healthy long enough to, to really find their way. And I'd put him in that category, but,
yeah, for sure.
Right,
he was electric out of the back end of the bullpen when he first came up.
Oh, and I trusted him. He was one of the few I didn't have to feel like I got on every time they came on into the game, or like every time they bring in Jabot or somebody, I was sitting there saying things I probably shouldn't be saying. And
yeah.
All right. One of my concerns last year, and of course, Ellie De La Cruz, I think he played in 162 games last year. Even played, I think he had a family member pass away, and still, maybe that was his escape or whatever. But obviously he's durable and reliable. But will his defensive issues get better? I mean, 20 plus errors at shortstop, and it seems like he makes the harder plays look easy, and some of the easier plays look harder, I should say.
I think so. I'm probably in the minority on this. I think he's going to get better. I think he's one of those guys that you just have to. He came up so young. He came up so young that it just feels like he's one of those guys that's going to continue to get better. I think last year was weird because, and I think part of this was him playing hurt a little bit. But 2 years ago, he was making all the hard plays, and he was struggling with the routine stuff. Last year, he didn't make as many hard play, like crazy plays, and also struggle with the routine stuff. But I think it's there's a couple things going against him. He's obviously 6'5" or whatever, which is tough. Being a shortstop, you got a lot of leveraging going. But one thing I always like to talk about for people that say, is Ellie De La Cruz ever going to get better? Like Derek Jeter had 22 errors in his first full season for the Yankees. He had like his fourth season, he had 24 errors. So there's a lot of people that don't realize that shortstop is a hard position. Like growing up, if you're playing shortstop, you're the best athlete on the team. They stick you out there and they're like, you're playing shortstop because that's where we're putting you. And I just think like he's been asked to do so much for this team at such a young age. I think he's going to grow into it, and I think he's going to get better defensively. But I don't know that for sure. I'm just taking a gander. I think he just has so much talent that I like to be able to think like Freddie Benavides always talks about, the Reds bench coach. He always talks about working with him. Like it's not for lack of trying. He wants it. They want it. I think he's going to continue to get better. It might not be all at once, but like, again, he's still so young. I think it's going to come all together at some point.
Matt here, he's a big fan and he goes to a lot of games, and he says he's disappointed if he goes to a game and Ellie's not in the lineup, but he thinks he needs a day off here and there. 162 games, man, that's a grind. That's a long season. And, honestly, grueling at times. Do you think him playing 162 games hurts his production? Do you think a day off would actually increase his production?
Yeah, I think last year how they handled him was probably not right. But part of it was Ellie was like they say every time they try to give him an off day, he's like, I want to play, which is awesome. That's obviously, again, as you're a coach, you would love a kid to be like, I want to play every day. But at some point, like you got to protect him from himself, because if he's hitting, like you said, he didn't hit a home run for a month and a half. Like he's clearly not helping the team on the level he should be at that point. So maybe give him rest day. And I think Tito's had a couple quotes this offseason basically saying, I should have given him, a couple days last year. So I'm pretty confident that they're going to learn from that last year and give him some more off days this year. Because, yeah, I think it definitely hurts his production when especially if it was healthy, it'd be hard. But he was out there. They've come out and said he was playing hurt. So I do think that's the case.
And it's not like you said, Arroyo he's a shortstop, is a good shortstop, so it's not like you don't have the depth to put somebody out there that, can fill that spot for a game or two. It's not like you're sitting for a week or a whole series, but it just seemed like, with it being such a long season, fatigue. I mean, they play a lot of back-to-back nights, travel, and it just seems like there's a lot of factors in there. And when a guy like Ellie doesn't hit a home run for a month and a half, you feel like, there could be something else there. And, I don't think with the Reds lineup they have this year, there's a need to play through injuries, and I get it, like you mentioned before about, we were talking off about Hunter Green and his elbow, and, he mentioned that, well, he wanted to keep playing or keep going out there for his team because they were in the playoff push, and, and you admire that. But, I don't feel like as a coach, I'd want to play somebody hurt who can't live up to full production or potentially has a chance to risk an injury that could linger longer,
Yeah, 100%.
These
Yeah,
guys
I
are major
totally
league
agree.
athletes, have the best medical care. I mean, they got the best nutrition, but it's just, I felt like there were times last year, just with the 20 plus errors at shortstop and just the number of strikeouts and production at the plate. And I felt like his stolen bases were down, and a lot of that could be just not getting on bases often. But is that something you feel like we see? If he gets on base, you feel like there will be aggressive on the base pass. Is that a Tito quality? I'm not as familiar with Francona. I know as I've been with some of the past managers, but how do you feel
Yeah,
like?
he says he's cautious. He says he likes to be aggressive, but he likes to be smart aggressive, which to me is cautious.
I
But
agree.
which I don't love. But I do think that Ellie's going to steal more than whatever he had 44 stolen bases last year, whatever it was. I think a big reason he didn't steal a ton in the second half was if you're playing with a quad injury, it's hard to be, it's hard to use your speed as much as you would healthy. So I think he's going to get on base more this year. I think Ellie could have a huge year offensively, which I think would lead to more stolen bases. The rest of the guys, I don't know how aggressive they'll be, but I kind of put Ellie in his own quadrant when it comes to that because I think he's the guy that you're mostly going to let run when he's healthy, just because he's so good at it.
Well, he can turn a single into a triple in 2 pitches. We've seen him do it multiple times. It's actually a game changer when he's on the base pass. The pitcher probably doesn't throw as many strikes for often worrying about the runner and things of that nature. But all right, just a couple more things. I know we're getting close to, you got things to do, but any surprises you see this year from any individuals you see making, just that, say a couple months into the season, we're like, wow, we didn't see that coming from him, or anybody you see just tearing it up that may be a bit of surprise.
I'm going to give a bold prediction. I'm going to say kind of what I hit on earlier. And I don't know what his numbers will look like, but I'm going to say at some point in the season, I think Reese Hines will contribute to this team in a decent way. I just think he's coming along, and he's actually working on the things that he struggled at. Like CES's Hines are very similar. Like they chase. But again, when you go down to AAA for a season and you improve your strikeout rate by 12%, and he crushes balls in the zone, like he's been crushing balls in the zone all spring long. I'm going to say we see a significant contribution from Reese Hines at some point this season. So I don't know if that's a month or 2 months, but I think he's a player that a lot of Reds fans have kind of given up on, but I don't think he's really ever gotten a fair shake. Like I went back
Right.
the other day, I was looking, even when he went crazy 2 years ago around the All-Star break, I think they gave him 4 games after that crazy hot streak, and he went like 0 for 16 in those 4 games, and he was right back down. So it's like he's never gotten to play like every day, and I don't think he's probably going to get that this year. But as a young guy, that takes a lot to getting used to because you played every day all of your life, and now you get to the big leagues and like you have to learn how to be a bench guy, or maybe you're only going to play against left-handed pitching or whatever it is. Like I remember last year they brought him up at one point and they played him against a lefty, and it was like Garrett Crochet from the Red Sox. It's like, well, that's not fair. He's
Right.
the best left-handed pitcher in baseball. So like sometimes you have to look. But anyway, I'm just really high on Reese Hines, as you can tell. And that's probably, I just wanted to kind of give a different answer than anyone on the current roster. But I think at some point, again, probably a bold prediction, but at some point I think we could see him actually contribute
I
to this
think
team.
I saw somewhere that today he hit a single that like 114 miles per hour exit velocity on a single.
That's probably
Like,
right. That's what I'm saying. I can look it up here while I'm talking, but he hit one the other day. I was doing a podcast, and there's called a deep drive of the day that you do give it. If there's no home runs, we just give it to the hardest hit exit velocity, and it was a ground out, but he hit it 113.1 mile per hour, and
today?
it's like, no, that was the
Oh,
other day.
okay.
It was over the weekend. But like he's hit a ton of balls crazy hard, which tells me he's staying in the zone, he's not chasing, and he's got the talent. Like if he stops chasing and keeps in the strike zone, like he's going to do damage. So I just think he has a ton of untapped, upside that I'm hoping we get to see it at some point.
Do you is he a one position outfielder? Can he play left and right? Is he only on the ends, or does he play
I
the
think
middle?
I think he played a decent amount of center field last year with Louisville, and then he plays mostly right field, I want to believe. Um, Without looking it up, I believe that's where he played mostly last year. But he's not really known for his defense. Um, he's got a great arm, very good arm, but he came up as a third baseman. So it's kind of he's got a little like Marte in him where there's some balls that are hit out there that you're kind of like holding your breath out there. But I think he's only going to get better because again, when you transition from the infield, it's hard, you know.
And one guy we haven't really mentioned that I feel like could be the straw that stirs the drink for him is TJ Friedel. I mean, leadoff hitter if he can stay healthy. I think he excels in that role. But last thing, give me your starting lineup and batting order before we go. Starting lineup and batting order. Opening day.
Oh gosh. Okay. I'll go what I think it's going to be. So let's make sure I don't forget anyone. So what's interesting, so like they're going to face Crochet, who's a lefty. But I think Friedel will still bat first, play center field. Second's interesting. They've talked about all offseason who they're going to put second. I don't know if he's just doing it to do it, but Francona in the spring keeps putting McLean in the 2-hole. Even after last year, he kind of in the offseason has said he stuck with him too long in a 2-hole. He's kind of said I should have moved on from him earlier. But again, he trusts McLean a lot. So I'm just going to say he's going to put him back in there. I don't know if I would do that right away, but I will say that just for the sake of how spring training lineups have looked. Again, that could mean absolutely nothing, but that's what I'll say. He's already basically said Ellie's going to bat third. I think we'll see Suarez fourth, probably DH. I'd say probably Sal Stewart fifth at first base. Sixth against. So let's see. All right, so I'm missing right field. I'm missing left field. Obviously, so Marte. So we got Marte. Marte will be in there against the lefty. He'll probably be in there against the righty. Steer. So I'll go Steer in front of Marte. So Steer at sixth. Marte 7. So I'm missing Tyler Stevenson and then a left fielder. See, then I say that, and I almost want to put this is hard to do without looking at it.
Right.
But I'll just answer it and say I think I'll switch Stevenson 7, put Marte down in 8th, maybe. I don't know. Marte could be amazing. He could really struggle. So, and then 9 would be whoever you're playing in left field, probably. I guess Benson or no. You know what? See, I already forgot someone. Dane Myers would be in the lineup because he's probably going to start against all lefties.
He's had a decent spring.
Yeah, and that's literally what they got him for is he's a good defender and he crushes left-handed pitching. So he would probably be either center field and they move Friedel over to left field, or he would play left and Friedel would play center. But see, now I think Myers would be high. Now it's hard to just say it out loud
without looking at it. But I mean, I don't necessarily need the exact order. I was just curious. I mean,
I'm pretty confident those are the guys we would see against the lefty. I think Friedel would probably be the only lefty in the lineup. I would think, because if Blade, Benson, or Lowe make it, I don't see any of those guys being in the lineup. When you have Myers, Marte out there, and then first base, you don't need to play. If Lowe makes it, you don't need to play him because you have Stewart and Suarez. Yeah. So, and then did I even say Cabrian Hayes?
No,
I somehow missed Cabrian Hayes. He would be batting 9th. Cabrian Hayes is going to be batting 9th if he's in the lineup, but he's going to be in the lineup. Then so I may have given 10 guys.
Yeah, we got 10 guys against their 9. I like our chances.
Where did I mess up?
Well, we got
how many outfielders
you got Steer, you got Steer and Sal Stewart. Where would Steer play, left?
Oh, so that's the thing. So
he would play start Steer over Sal.
That's the interesting thing. So against the left-handed pitching, you got Dane Myers, Steer, who are going to play outfield maybe, and Marte. You got 3 guys for 2. See, I would say Francona's not going to do this, I don't think. But I would probably play Myers over Friedel against the lefty because Friedel's splits against left-handed pitching have been really bad the last 2 years. And then you can fit Steer, Marte, Stewart, Myers all in the lineup. But I would be shocked if that happens. I think we'll see opening day, and I think Friedel will be hitting leadoff opening day. But that's interesting. If you put Friedel in there, you're keeping somebody out, a right-hander out, which is interesting.
Right, and I agree with you. I don't see Friedel not starting and batting leadoff, even though it's against the lefty. I see Francona starting him, but it definitely and honestly, if it comes down between Stewart and Steer, I think he'll start Steer. I'm not saying Stewart won't get a bat or two, but I still feel like, I don't know, Francona seems like one of those guys that, he's loyal, and once he trusts you, it seems like you get the nod over those guys. But definitely got to have a third baseman, so Cabrian Hayes will probably be in there. But I'm excited. I'm not going to lie. I get excited every year about this time because I feel like the Reds are going to be the World Series champions. I even got on my 1990 official batting order shirt, wire to wire, the story of the 1990 Cincinnati Reds. I was actually,
Love that.
I actually remember that. So I don't remember the 75, 76. So I got to hang my hat on the 1990. But you feel like Reds first place in the Central?
I'm not going to say no to that. So I'll say yes. It's still March 8th. So we're going to be super optimistic and say yes. And we're going to say we get over the hump against the Brewers. And it's in March 8th. I'm going to say we're winning the division.
I appreciate you, man. Guys, if you're on X, Twitter, follow Greg at RedsDaily4. I'm assuming that 4 could be for Brandon Phillips.
It was my favorite number growing up, which I was a huge Brandon Phillips fan. So it goes both ways.
Follow Greg on that Reds Daily 4. Greg, I hope we can get you back on during the season. You provide a lot of information and knowledge that very few have. And thank you for dedicating about 45 minutes to me this Sunday. And I'm sure the listeners enjoyed it as well. I'm getting a lot of positive feedback. So I appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Queen City, stay hot. From the banks of the Ohio where the river runs slow, got the whole Queen City screaming, let's go. Red caps high when the first pitch pops, Cincinnati on fire and we stay red hot. Big red legacy, bats stay loud, all flying out while the fans stand proud. From the riverfront seats to the top of the chart, talking Reds baseball, yeah we bring the spark. Stay red hot, let the whole world know. Queen City baseball, putting on the show. From the first pitch drop to the last swing shot, Cincinnati Reds